I'm Carole Taylor. On this edition of Journal, a look at what's happening in our economy. It is a tumultuous time, quite apart from tariffs. Housing prices, while falling, are still unaffordable for many. Real estate companies have been forced to lay off long-time employees, and forestry companies are in big trouble. Youth unemployment hit 14.6% this summer, and that's the highest since 2010. And governments are announcing unbelievable deficits. As well, many citizens are turning against one of the principles of what it means to be Canadian, immigration. A Nanos poll showed an erosion of support, with 71% of Canadians either strongly or somewhat strongly wanting to reduce the number of immigrants. Most of this wrath is focused on the careless way in which the numbers of temporary foreign workers and international student visas were allowed to balloon, putting pressure on housing, healthcare, education, and social services all across the country. As mayor of Port Coquitlam, Brad West is no stranger to taking the brunt of policies designed by another level of government. The forced densification of BC's municipalities by the provincial government, he calls throwing urban planning out the window. Brad also laments the lack of real action on involuntary care when we need at least one other forensic psychiatric hospital to care for those who are in desperate need of help. And then there's decriminalization that precipitated such disorder on our streets. So it's not surprising that Brad West also has something to say about our economy and immigration. However, his analysis may surprise you. We'll be back in a moment with Mayor Brad West. Mayor West, I'm so glad to see you again. I always appreciate the fact that whatever the issue is simmering in society, you're not afraid to stand up and say what you think, and even if it ruffles some feathers, for sure. One of the op-eds that you've done recently really caught my attention because you referred to BC's economy as a house of cards, which doesn't sound very good.
No.
So can you explain what you were headed towards?
You know, British Columbia was once synonymous with industries that really built the prosperity that we were known for, whether that's forestry, mining, energy, fisheries even. And what we have seen over a number of years and decades is a transformation from our economy that was one based on these sort of fundamental economic values to one that is almost entirely dependent upon real estate. Real estate makes up about 30% of BC's GDP right now. For any other economy around the world, a healthier, more balanced number is about 15%. So we have put a heck of a lot of eggs in one basket. And when your economy is so tied to real estate, you're exposing yourself to an enormous amount of risk. And I think that that's exactly what we're seeing right now. The real estate market is incredibly challenged. A lot of people in the industry would tell you it's never been worse. And what's happening as a result? We're seeing exploding deficits. Our debt as a province has never been higher. The whole economic model of our province is faltering. And again, I think it's because we stepped away from the kind of fundamental economics that have built British Columbia, that keep people employed in excellent family-supporting jobs, that contribute to that broad-based prosperity, that provide the revenue for all the government services that we consume, from healthcare to education. You know, those are funded because people go work in mines, because people go into sawmills. And the revenue that's generated from that economic activity supports all of us. And so we turned our back on that. We tried to over-regulate those industries and basically wrestle them to the ground, become a shadow of their former self. And again, in place of it, we've kind of just gone into this roller coaster ride of the real estate economy. And when it's good, people think it's really good, but it's not sustainable. And what we're seeing now is that we are so overexposed. We don't have diversification. we have dependency.
And so how does such a revolutionary change happen to a whole economy? Is it willful? Is it seductive because money was easier coming in from real estate? And we've had an NDP government for quite a while, and yet what you're talking about is so many unionized workers and non-unionized workers, but they're the ones that are really being hurt.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of those things. I think it is incredibly seductive. When the real estate market was doing well, people had this notion that so much prosperity was being generated. And yet, what happened is we turned away from the sectors of our economy that can sustain people through more difficult economic headwinds. The catch in having a real estate-based economy is that it has to be sustained with new buyers constantly. You have to feed the beast. And so how did they feed the beast in British Columbia and in Canada, in fact? It was through unprecedented population growth.
Not homegrown population,
through
immigration.
Through immigration and through a variety of immigration schemes, basically. One being the temporary foreign worker program, which is notorious now for being rife with fraud and abuse. Also international students. And so these former programs that were trying to deal with a very particular issue, highly skilled specialty workers who were difficult to find in Canada, or in the international student stream. I mean, originally that was really about education and cultural exchange. And instead, they turned them into pipelines of population growth. But of course, when people come here, they don't just inflate the economy in the real estate market, they also have needs. And so what did we see? We've seen our healthcare system been taken to the breaking point. We've seen our education system overwhelmed. We've seen infrastructure have incredible pressure and strain on it. When people are concerned rightfully about the costs of increasing infrastructure projects, you need to understand that one of the main drivers for all of these utility upgrades is because of capacity. Because in an incredibly short period of time, and I think in an incredibly short-sighted way, our government decided to bring in as many people as possible as quickly as possible.
What numbers are you going on from?
In 2023, our country had about 1.27 million new people come in a single year. There's not a country in the G7 that even comes close to that. And so we shattered every record in such a short period of time. And at some point, the math takes over. You simply cannot absorb that number of people in such a short period of time without overwhelming all of your systems. And so I think that's exactly what happened. But I do think there was a thought to it that by doing it, the one thing you will do is you will keep the real estate market artificially inflated because you're increasing demand. And again, we had this sort of smoke and mirrors economy where, well, if real estate continues going up, 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 then people must be doing well. The house of cards is coming crashing down, Carole, and we're seeing the impact of it all around us.
And so the other idea that they put forward was, well, we'll just build more and more supply, and that'll make everything affordable. That has not been the case.
You only need to go look online right now. There are more condos for sale in this province than you could shake a stick at. There's just a huge glut of supply. The irony is they're building what people are saying they don't want. Every piece of analysis and survey that has been done by any level of government says that people, by and large, I'm generalizing, but the majority of people have a preference for ground-orientated housing. And yet, at the government's behest, what is being built is one-bedroom condos all over the place. Port Coquitlam is like just about every community in this province. We're under a housing target and supply order from the provincial government. And if I were to follow that order to the letter, the only thing we would be building in Port Coquitlam is one-bedroom condos, of which there are thousands and thousands sitting empty throughout the region because people can't afford them, and it's not their preferred housing form. We're just in an alternate universe, it seems, where government has lost touch with what people want and what they can afford.
Are you going to follow the rules?
Well, as you can probably guess, I am a big rule follower, especially when it comes from some bureaucrat in Victoria who probably couldn't find Port Coquitlam on a map. We're talking as a council about making decisions that are right for our community. That's why I have been elected mayor. That's why City Council has been elected by the people of Port Coquitlam to do what's right for our community, and that's what we'll do. And if that doesn't line up with what the provincial government wants, then I'm sure we'll have a discussion about that.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. Mayor Brad West has certainly identified one of the big issues for us as a community in Canada, and that is that a budget and the economy has become very dependent on real estate and lost so many of the other areas that used to support a vibrant economy and good employment. So my question to you is, you've said, yes, well, we've let that kind of model develop, and to feed the beast, it means we just have to have this huge immigration, which then cause all of these other problems. Mm-hmm. How do you ever start to unwind it?
Well, I think that is the most consequential decision in front of us, because we didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. And it's not going to be without its own challenges. But I think in the long run, we have to get back to a more sustainable economic model in this province, or else what future are our children going to have? If we continue on the current trajectory, I am really fearful about the future of British Columbia. So what do we have to do? To begin to unwind, I think first we have to get our natural resource industries out of this stranglehold that we have them in. You know, government has put them into a chokehold. The requirements for consultation, where they have to talk to just about every person on God's green earth before they can have a mine open or log a part of the province. We have to get back to some common sense on this stuff. You know, it takes way too long. The harsh reality is that business and industry is not going to invest in a place where it takes 10 years to do anything, and the outcome is completely up in the air. You know, these processes, which I think in the beginning were designed to ensure that the public interest is protected and that things were done properly, we got to get back to that. We can't create a never-ending process that allows people who are ideologically opposed to these industries to begin with to weaponize them. And so that's what's happened. And you only need to talk to any person in the industry and hear the horror stories of what they're going through. Because at the end of the day, who's harmed most by this? It's the men and women in British Columbia who earn their living and provide for their families by going and doing that work. And then it's all the rest of us who, whether we know it or not, are benefiting from that. There's a tendency in Metro Vancouver to live in a bit of a bubble and to think that we're somehow disconnected from the economic activity that occurs in the rest of the province. But nothing could be further from the truth. I like to say that Port Coquitlam is as much a resource community as Prince George, because there are so many people in my community who are benefiting from the resource activity that happens there, and who may in fact even be employed. There's a lot of office jobs, there's a lot of professional jobs that are connected to the mining industry, the energy industry, and others. So I think if we're going to get to a more sustainable place, we've got to get back to some of those fundamental, basic economic truths around British Columbia and what we have been so fortunate to be blessed with, and not have it be the Wild West where they can do anything they want, but to come back to a balanced position where we're not allowing those who don't want anything to happen ever to be able to succeed in doing that. So that would be the first thing.
What bothers me just with that idea, which is the right idea, is that you see politicians, and I'm provincial and federal, saying, oh, absolutely, we're going to get critical minerals and we're going to do this and we're going to get everything done. What actually happens is very different, like nothing happens.
I think you've just put your finger on it. To me, it's whether it's this issue or just about anything that government touches, I think it's the biggest challenge. It's the follow-through. It is so easy for a politician to get up and to say the right things. Are they willing to actually do the hard work to change the culture of government? You know, the people who are responsible within the bureaucracy, who have a lot of power and control over this decision making, who I don't think are getting the message, because it doesn't seem like it's changing. You know, you get government say, yeah, we're going to fast track. I mean, for goodness sakes, how many times have we heard this? We're going to fast track this. We're going to, you know, expedite this. We're going to deal with this issue. And yet it doesn't change. And I think it's because you have the press release, you make the speech, but there's no follow through to actually change the culture and attitude of government, of the bureaucracy, of the people who are making decisions about these things every single day, who have a mindset of no. No. Not of yes, not of let me find a way to help make this happen, but looking for reasons why it can't. And, you know, a perfect example of that that's not resource-based is the fact that it took 2 years of me and my community fighting like hell to get a school rebuilt that burned down. And the government has finally relented and said, okay, it's going to happen. But for 2 years, some bureaucrat in the basement in Victoria had control of this process. And I don't know, employing a lot of consultants, shuffling around a lot of paper, but not actually getting on with it. And it's incredibly frustrating. And you can hear the politicians say the right thing, you know, until the cows come home. But until we actually see an attitudinal shift in government in terms of processing and actioning these things, then we still got a lot of work to do.
A bit of good journalism happened while the Premier was in Asia, and he was very proudly talking about value-added wood products in BC, and the journalist went to that particular company in BC, and they said, well, we're afraid we're going to have to close down. We haven't got enough wood to do it because we didn't manage to get our full wood cut, or it's in a different area, or there's some regulation that bragging about it, but it's still not working.
You see this disconnect over and over and over again. Say one thing and the other is happening. And so maybe it's time for fewer press conferences and fewer speeches and more hard work to actually change how government is doing things. Let's have the press conferences when it's done, not at the beginning, at the end, when it's done and completed. And then I think everyone will give all the politicians involved well-deserved kudos if they actually get it done. I mean, even with respect to the fact that, you know, the Prime Minister has had to announce we're going to have these major projects and we're going to have, you know, a special list. And if you're on the list, then don't worry, you're exempt from this process. That's, you're basically admitting the process is so flawed, so problematic, that the solution isn't to fix the process so every project benefits, but now you got to work hard to get on the special list. I mean, to me, that sums it up right there. Let's get back to basics. It shouldn't matter whether it's a major project or a small one. Small projects add up to big projects, but they shouldn't be left out. They should benefit from a process that is common sense, that's streamlined, that allows things to happen. We shouldn't have to create a special list where we're admitting that everything is so flawed, so rather than fix it, well, we'll just exempt you.
Well, when are you going to let your common sense voice and ideas get into the provincial arena?
Well, I appreciate that. I feel like I'm able to make an impact using my voice as mayor right now, and I'm going to continue to do that. I've said this before, and again, this is probably something about politicians saying things and what do they really mean. But I really mean it when I say that I have 2 boys, 8 and 4. And I wouldn't be sacrificing my time with them right now for anything in the world.
On that note, which I respect and, of course, wish you well, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're going to be back in just a minute. I remember when I was finance minister, forestry was a major source of revenue for the province. Not so much anymore. The kind of changes Mayor Brad West feels are necessary to get our economy back in balance with our natural resources sector will only be possible if leaders at the provincial and federal levels believe it's the right thing to do. Let me know your thoughts on YouTube. Till next time, I'm Carole Taylor.